Hello everyone. As you can see, my background there is a screenshot from an episode of the American version of The Office, one of my favorite sitcoms ever. There was one of the episodes, this one here, where they're in a staff meeting and Michael Scott is talking about something, but nobody's paying attention. They're all watching this CRT TV behind them with a DVD player connected to it, and the DVD player's gone into screensaver mode, and there's this DVD box bouncing around the screen, and they're all waiting for it to hit the corner exactly instead of bouncing against one wall or another. And I'll just play that here as a reminder to everyone.
Believe.
Maybe we could have some sort of riddle,
Wait for it.
like something that you have to look for. Sort of a where's Waldo? All right, let's quit while we're ahead.
That was so awesome.
That was awesome. Thank you.
All right, why do I bring this up? So I was thinking about PowerApps the other day and how to do game logic in PowerApps. And I have another video where I created a game that was invented by my son. But this one's a little different. I was thinking, how do you do, can PowerApps do animation? And I've known that it can do basic animation where you take the value from a timer and use that to move something across the screen or create a fade in or something like that for a designated amount of time. But video games require that the animation go on forever, essentially. And how do you do that? And so I thought of this video came to mind, and I was like, oh, can I recreate the bouncing DVD logo in PowerApps? How might I do that? Because you got the issue of animation needs to go on forever, but you also have to implement collision detection, which is something that's common in a video game, not common in a business application. So anyway, we'll explore that a little bit today. So let me switch over to what I created. Okay, here we go. So this is my app. Instead of doing the DVD route, I decided what if this existed in the 80s in the form of a VHS video player. So that's what we have here. I just took a picture of an old Sony Trinitron TV monitor and then applied buttons over the top of the buttons on the monitor itself. And so we can turn it on and you'll see that the VHS logo bounces around. Didn't quite hit the corner there. You can adjust the speed here, speed it up or slow it down. You can also adjust the time duration for the timer that controls this, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. And you can adjust the vector degrees to move the logo around if it's not going quite at the angle that you want it. Pretty simple, so it's not really a useful application other than it's kind of neat to look at. It also, you'll notice it changes colors, just like the DVD one did in the Office video. Alright, so let's get into the actual project. Alright, here it is in PowerApps. Let me just go through everything and show what we have here. So the buttons are all in a buttons container, and like I said, they just overlay the buttons that are in the picture itself. That's fairly self-explanatory. There's the sound for when the VHS logo hits the corners. There's the message, and this was really there for development, so I could see the values that were being generated by the logic, but I thought it also looked cool, so I just kept it on the screen. And then the container for the VHS logo, and it's a combination of vector and bitmap graphics. So the VHS logo itself is a scalable vector graphic, and then on top of that is a sort of a glow to make it look more like it was generated by a CRT screen that this is supposed to be emulating. So if you look, I don't know if you can really see it that well, but it kind of has a glow effect to it, and there's little very faint scan lines running across it, or what look like scan lines. Anyway, yeah, and then let's see, and then the timer, this is kind of I'll get into this, is kind of the key to the whole thing. of how it works, and then a boundary, which tells the logic where the VHS logo should be bouncing from, and then of course the Trinitron background. So I was thinking, how do you go, again going back to the animation needs to continue in perpetuity, how do you do that in PowerApps? And just like regular animation, you can do it with a timer. And so as long as you set the timer on repeat, which it is, it will just go on forever. And so the timer allows you to run code either on timer start or on timer end, and I chose to do it on timer start. So every time the timer runs through its cycle, it runs this code which moves the VHS logo. And I have the timer by default set to 30 milliseconds, so that's pretty quick. So if it's running this code every 30 milliseconds, then it appears to animate on the screen. And so let me just walk through that. So you can see there are 4 sections of code here. The ball's bouncing off the upper boundary, off the right side boundary, bottom boundary, and this should be left side boundary. I must have left that in there when I copied it from up here. But anyway, you can see that it does a check. It runs through each one of these for every time the timer ends, and it does a check to see where the cursor container is, which is this here. It contains the VHS logo, where that is relative to the boundary, and in this case the Y position of the boundary. So if the cursor container is less than the Y position of the boundary, then we need to make a change. That tells us that it's gone past the upper boundary, and we need to direct it back in the other way. And so it plays a little ping pong sound, changes the color of the logo, and then here's the math where it determines the output angle based on the input angle. And I'm not going to get into all the math here, but just note that it makes note of the input angle relative to the angle of the upper boundary, and then just calculates the mirrored angle. And then it does the same for the right side, bottom, and what should be the left side boundary here. Okay, I forgot to talk about this code up here. So this is the code that advances the ball forward based on the value of what global ball X and Y is set to. So this is actually creates the forward movement of not the ball, but the VHS logo. I'd started with the ball, which is why it's called that. And then, so if it moves forward, but it goes beyond the up, right, bottom, or left boundary, then this code here will identify that and adjust it accordingly for the next bounce, so that it bounces off at the correct angle. The actual angle is, or the distance that the logo is supposed to move is determined by this code here. So this converts the vector, the angle, to a radian, and then that gets processed with sine for x and negative cosine for y to determine the distance x and y to actually move the logo. Anyway, I think that's essentially it. I'm pretty happy that I was able to get that to work. Yeah, let's go back to the demo here real quick, and I'll start it up again. I'm going to go through these buttons here real quick. So this one, like I mentioned before, this is when I speed it up or slow it down, this is actually calculating the distance that it moves with every iteration of the timer. So if I lower it down, essentially the speed number that you see right here translates into pixels, though it's not 1 for 1. But that's essentially 1 pixel averaged between the X and the Y. And then that obviously speeds it up. And then these little buttons here, you can see the timer duration right now, it's at 10 milliseconds. I crank that way up to what's essentially 10 milliseconds, or a tenth of a second. You can see it gets much choppier, even though our speed is still at 6. So between those two, you can adjust the speed. And then vector as well for the angle. And one thing I had to do with the vector is it had to, I didn't want the values going, below 0 into a negative direction or above 360, it'll do it, and the formulas will all process the math. In fact, that's how it worked originally, but then I quickly found out that as the logo bounced around and delved into negative numbers or positive numbers above 360, they got to the point where the numbers were really large, and that would slow down the math, so I had to include some code to keep that under control. So anyway, kind of a fun project, and it does work. A VHS player that nobody ever really had. So I don't know what use this is for business applications, but it was a fun exercise just to see what I could get PowerApps to do. Have a good day.